under the same roof, share the love, embracing the different feelings like hand, glove. When the peace, joy, to feel side. Together we shine in each other's light. Why do we stand in love's pure mind? Watching the world in love. Heartbeat in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure mind.
Okay, we're about to tune back in to Donald Trump's meeting.
Good, that's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is a very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that. President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Huh? Where? Oh, you look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is, you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelensky and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. We got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelensky and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone. Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Or sorry, maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about
This is the Fox 5 News Block.
Beware at the beach. Words of warning from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy as Hurricane Erin moves north. This powerful storm creating dangerous rip currents. And breaking news in Washington, D.C., the much anticipated meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky at the White House is now underway. Good afternoon, and Bianca Peters. Welcome to the News Block. This conference striking a hopeful tone in a stark contrast to the previous meeting between the leaders. Zelensky saying that he is looking forward to trilateral talks with the goal of ending the war with Russia. Fox 5 Sharon Crowley is live in the newsroom with more on what they had to say. Sharon.
Yeah, Bianca, it's an historic meeting underway at the White House as President Trump tries to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky meeting at the Oval Office days after President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Zelensky arrived, as you can see, at the White House about 2 hours ago. Many of Europe's leaders are also in Washington for talks on ending the war in Ukraine. President Trump is hosting Zelensky and the leaders to discuss how to protect Ukraine's interests. Asked if he would send U.S. troops to protect Ukraine, President Trump shifted responsibility to European allies.
Not sure why that switched away, but anyway, let me pull this up here.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock, basically with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call. And from there, we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 life security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing. And congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President,
Please.
dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday, but now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out. And if we can do that, I will say, and again, I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you. Thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitment, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months amongst the coalition of the willings, with the support of NATO, to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments. And you can be sure that Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today, a historic step actually could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years. And so far, nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelensky. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the president of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe, I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue? We'll do the best to get it ended. And I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will. And we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And, or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best, but I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair, because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended. And so that's all we ask for is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Guys, if you could hit the like button, share, and subscribe. All right, I guess that's it for now as far as the meeting goes. Let's see what else we have here.
Zelensky arrived, as you can see, at the White House about 2 hours ago. Many of Europe's leaders are also in Washington for talks on ending the war in Ukraine. President Trump is hosting Zelensky and the leaders to discuss how to protect Ukraine's interests. Asked if he would send U.S. troops to protect Ukraine, President Trump shifted responsibility to European allies.
People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people.
So they've started the big meeting. We're going to cover it when they come back. So stay tuned for those of you who want to cover it. I'm going to cover this all day long. I know everybody is excited about hearing the end results, but most people today, we've had thousands of people. We had over 200,000 people come through, and most people are asking about the Epstein files. Can you believe that? And we have people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, a lot of MAGA folks. But the big question is the Epstein files. Would you believe it? We're going to play various feeds until the meeting is over and we have another press conference. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Well, last week, for whatever reason, a big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
So President Trump indicated that if talks go well today, he would have another meeting with both presidents of Ukraine and Russia, trilateral meeting, and Ukraine's long-term security and its borders are what's at stake. European leaders want to safeguard the region from widening aggression from Russia. So we'll be following it for you, Bianca.
All right, then. Thank you so much for staying on top of that. To some developing news now, the very latest on Hurricane Erin. After pelting parts of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands with heavy rains and winds yesterday, it has now re-intensified as a Category 4 storm. It's moving closer to the southeast Bahamas. While it is expected to stay east of the U.S., it is projected to move north later this week, bringing dangerous surf and rip currents to the Jersey shore. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says it is crucial for everyone to pay attention to beach flags.
I'm going to drop a link in case any of you guys like to come up and have a discussion. We're always up for debates here, but we ask that you please do so with respect and decency, folks. Also in the comments, please go easy. Please don't be too vulgar with your expressions. Be mindful of other people's feelings. So again, they're having the meeting. We just covered we covered 2 press conferences so far, but now we're going to wait and see what the rest of the day brings.
Crown Heights Sunday around 3:30 in the morning. And bullets began to fly. 3 people were killed. The NYPD police commissioner held a press conference with details on the mass shooting.
2 of the 3 deceased are the shooters involved in the incident. Mr. Childs has 8 prior arrests and is listed in our criminal group database as a member of Folk Nation, a violent gang that terrorizes Brooklyn and is responsible for at least 6 shootings so far this year. 3 of the other victims have also been identified as gang members under the Folk Nation umbrella. Mr. St. Louis has no relevant criminal history.
No arrests have been made yet, but police say they know the suspects because they are listed in their database and expect to catch up with them very soon. Community leaders will gather this afternoon for a show of support and unity. Meanwhile, a deadly police-involved shooting in Washington Heights. Police say an off-duty NYPD officer was standing outside of a residential building near West 173rd Street and Amsterdam Avenue at around 9:45 last night when 2 men on mopeds approached him. According to the police, one of them got off and asked if he knew a person's name and then pulled out a firearm. The officer drew his gun and fired several shots at the man, who was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The other man took off on his moped. And Mayor Adams and the NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch announcing plans to expand quality of life teams across Staten Island. These special Q teams are used to address a variety of issues, including illegal mopeds, outdoor drug use, homeless encampments, and noise complaints. The city has already expanded the program in Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. And according to the mayor's office, Q teams have responded to more than 41,000 911 and 311 calls.
We're going to see in this borough safer and cleaner neighborhoods thanks to our NYPD quality of life teams. Our localized precinct-based teams will be helping reducing crime and improve quality of life conditions.
NYPD says it plans to bring quality of life teams to all housing commands later this month. And the MTA and Governor Hochul say plans to extend the 2nd Avenue subway into East Harlem are moving forward. During a special MTA board meeting today, a nearly $2 billion contract was awarded to complete part of the construction project. Phase 2 of the extension will add 3 new Q line stations at 106th, 116th, and 125th Streets by September of 2032. The MTA says it will cost about 10% less than Phase 1 and bring greatly needed transit options to East Harlem. Meanwhile, Lyft will soon require age verification for city bikes after it was requested by the city. According to AM New York, Lyft, which runs City Bike, agreed to start a brand new system where people will need to verify if they are 16 or older in order to ride city bikes. First Deputy Mayor Randy Mastro.
So, folks, we have a lot of people coming in. We're waiting to see the results of the meeting. We've had 2 press conferences so far today. A lot of people came through. A lot of great expressions in the comments, but a lot of bad too. Please, guys, let's just be decent and respectful in the comments. We're going to continue to cover this, especially when the president comes back with the next press conference. I'm going to try to find, everybody is demanding that we cover Epstein in the interim, so I'm going to try to find the 60 minutes video that came out over the weekend in regards to the Epstein files. Maybe, perhaps, we can find that. Give me a minute. Sit tight while we try to find the particular video we're looking for here. All right. And again, thank you guys for tuning in to the channel. We're going to stay tuned until the actual next press conference comes in.
The dream was travel and freedom, but the reality is just work in different time zones.
All right.
And I'm all sweaty in running shorts. Donald Trump walks in, hovering and smirking like a Cheshire grin. The president and the pedophile.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
So this was released by 60 Minutes, I believe, but within the last couple of days. We'll check this out until the president comes back with the leaders that came over from the EU.
He's been dead for 6 years.
Trump supporters see Jeffrey Epstein as the devil.
But billionaire Jeffrey Epstein...
We need to release the Epstein list.
I call it the Epstein hoax.
...continues to haunt Donald Trump.
Trump really seems to be hiding something.
That's next on 60 Minutes. No matter the ultimate outcome of Donald Trump's face-to-face dialogue with Vladimir Putin in Alaska...
Hey, thank you, Chris Brown. I appreciate that.
Just getting the meeting to happen is a significant achievement for the US president. It's clear Trump is not without talents. On his home front, he's been particularly adept in his ability to endure scandal. In the last 5 years, the president's faced 91 felony counts, 4 criminal indictments, 2 impeachment trials, and in a civil case has been found liable for sexual abuse. Yet last November, a majority of Americans still voted for him to lead them. Now, though, there are chinks in Trump's armour. The reason is his bumpy handling of the so-called Epstein files, evidence that may or may not exist about the powerful connections.
Thank you, Donald Willis. Thanks for tuning in.
Pedophile, the now dead billionaire Jeffrey Epstein.
Guys, hit the like button, share, and subscribe if you like the material. Thank you.
The now dead billionaire Jeffrey Epstein.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
It's the question that has consumed Washington, D.C. and the world for weeks. Just what was Donald Trump's relationship with the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein? And how much does the president know about the depraved world created by the pedophile financier?
Are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
A billionaire accused of child sex trafficking.
Yes.
Epstein was connected to some of the most powerful people in the world. And despite their friendship, the president has long positioned himself as the man capable of exposing Jeffrey Epstein's darkest secrets.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah.
But a few weeks ago, after months of teasing a release of the case files, the Trump administration unexpectedly backflipped.
A review from the Justice Department and FBI did not find any evidence that notorious sex offender Jeffrey Epstein kept a so-called client list.
The fallout has spiraled into a full-blown political scandal that Donald Trump, for once, can't seem to shake. At the heart of it is the friendship between the president and the pedophile. Is the president lying?
Oh, my heavens, yes. Yes, he's lying. Yes.
Is a long way from Washington, D.C.
For those that are just coming in, we're covering the 60 Minutes documentary, tuning in while we're waiting on the president to come back with the EU representatives to talk about the completion of the meeting.
It's where Maria Farmer has built a quiet
By the way, you can hit the like button, share, and subscribe if you like this type of information.
life for herself after she was abused by Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. But as scandal has engulfed the White House, she can no longer stay silent about President Trump's handling.
Do you have a car? Do you have a clean driving record? Did you know you can pay as low as $39
of the Epstein files?
It's one of the most egregious acts of injustice I've ever witnessed. It feels like Watergate times like a billion because it involves children. And I think that what he's doing is trying to cover up his association or affiliation with these people.
Since becoming president, Donald Trump has done everything in his power to distance himself from the billionaire financier and his vile crimes.
I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan.
But for Maria, there can be no doubting the depth of their relationship.
Epstein said he was his best friend. He just said, that's my best friend.
Maria was in her early 20s when she was hired and abused by Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-1990s. During that time, she witnessed firsthand how close her boss was to Donald Trump.
Epstein said when Trump and his wife divorced, Ivana, he said, I inherited Trump and Ghislaine inherited Ivana. And so you'll see Ivana at the house a lot and you'll see Trump at the offices, but the twain will never cross. They'll never meet.
It was in Epstein's Manhattan office that Maria claims she had a disturbing encounter with the now president.
First time I met him was the night before I started my job. And Epstein said, I need you to come up to the offices. And I was like, it's 9 o'clock at night, you know? And I guess I'll just run up there. And he said, okay. So I get there and I'm all sweaty in running shorts. Donald Trump walks in and he was really strange. And he stood, you know, hovering and smirking, like all knowing, you know, like omniscient grin, like a Cheshire grin. So I went. I made I don't know, it was just an instinct. I made the ugliest face I could think of. And Epstein thought it was adorable. He walked out and he goes, oh, no, Maria.
Again, guys, please be respectable in the chat. She's telling her real life story, not a third party. She's telling what happened to her.
No, she's not here for you. Just like that. He emphasized, she's not here for you. He goes, come with me. And he escorts Trump. So here's Epstein's part. He escorts Trump into this other room. And Trump utters under his breath, he mutters, oh, I thought she was 16. And I thought that was just really weird. Like it was beyond locker room talk.
Maria says she never saw Trump behave inappropriately, and the White House has contested her version of events, insisting the president never visited Epstein's offices. So when the White House says Donald Trump was never at Jeffrey Epstein's offices.
Okay, guys, Juliet Bravo, thank you for your participation. She said Epstein lies. This woman had no relationship with Trump, period. Thank you, Juliet.
Is the president lying?
Oh, my heavens, yes. Yes, he's lying. Yes.
As far as Lee, yes, I thought the same thing. She kind of looks like Clinton.
The friendship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein is well documented. For nearly 2 decades, they were well known as men about town. One, a notorious property developer, the other, a wealthy financier. They were often seen together at parties and events from New York to Florida.
Louise says, what pigs? Really twisted and dangerous.
Trump was a passenger on Epstein's private jet, both alone and with his family. Epstein was even a guest at Trump's wedding to Marla Maples. And in 2002, he described Jeffrey Epstein as a terrific guy, telling a journalist that his friend was a lot of fun to be with and that he liked beautiful women, many on the younger side. But behind the glamorous facade, Jeffrey Epstein was a monster. By 2006, he had been exposed as a pedophile,
Yes, ma'am.
convicted of child sex trafficking. But it would be years before the true extent of his depravity would be revealed. By then, Donald Trump says he had cut him off.
For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. Yeah, he stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out.
However the friendship soured, it's now under renewed scrutiny after President Trump backflipped on an election promise to release the so-called Epstein files. What is it about the Epstein case, these promised files, that's so alluring, so fascinating to Trump's followers and his detractors?
There were a lot of unanswered questions. How did he make so much money? Why were all of these influential people, from Bill Gates to Bill Clinton to Donald Trump, why did they all hang out with him? What exactly was he up to? And you have these real legitimate victims.
Will Summer is a seasoned political reporter and author. He says this issue has captivated Trump's Make America Great Again movement like no other.
I mean, Trump supporters see Jeffrey Epstein as the devil. I mean, they see him as a incredibly evil figure. And to be fair.
Okay, Jomsky26 says there's no way Trump didn't at least know what Epstein was doing, which makes him an accessory.
I mean, I think they're correct. But they also see him as perhaps as someone who was the key to this larger network. This guy who was, in their belief, providing young girls to world elites.
This is why I stopped shopping on Amazon, and you should too. Don't spend another dime on Amazon.
Many believe the names of who was in that network lie within the Epstein files. More than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence of the vile crimes committed against more than 1,000 girls and young women. Some, like the flight logs from his private plane, dubbed the Lolita Express, have already been made public, but any kind of client list remains elusive. Earlier this year, though, the president was told his name appears in the files several times. It's not clear in what capacity, but the revelation has added to the intrigue about why he won't make them public. In a sense, is that part of why this has become such a big problem for Trump? Because on one hand, his supporters who see Jeffrey Epstein as the devil, see Trump as the man who's going to bring it all to light and expose it all and bring it all down. But then on the other hand, he's clearly involved.
It's something that's very hard for them to figure out. And I think this is why this moment has been so challenging for Trump, because they were able to ignore, decades old video footage. But now that you have this more information about their relationship coming to light, and then the biggest obstacle, which is that Trump really seems to be hiding something. And so as a result, people, even Trump supporters, are starting to say, geez, this is really suspicious.
Maria Farmer is certainly suspicious. Not just because of her experience with the now president, but because she alerted authorities years ago. She was the first of Jeffrey Epstein's victims to sound the alarm, contacting the FBI in 1996 and documenting it in her diary at the time.
And I just remember trying to explain to this man at the FBI that children are in severe danger. And so I told him, I said, listen, I'm
So I'm monitoring the meeting. The minute Donald Trump and the leaders of the EU come back up, I would definitely bring it back up so we could watch the next press conference that comes through.
Her complaint wasn't taken seriously then
businessman. He's a New York fixture. And they said, oh, Donald Trump. The FBI guessed based on that brief description that I was discussing Donald Trump.
Her complaint wasn't taken seriously then or in 2006 when she repeated her allegations to federal authorities who were finally investigating Jeffrey Epstein. So when President Trump vowed to get to the bottom of the Epstein saga, Maria was cynical.
I reported him because I knew he was part of this gang. I didn't know on what level. I just knew that he was very much a part of it.
And as you'll see, the president's reluctance to be transparent has, for the first time, turned his supporters against him.
I expected files to be released and people that deserve to be held accountable.
In Washington, D.C., political scandals come and go, and no one's better at shaking them off than President Trump. But the case of the Epstein files has stuck like mud. Is this the biggest crisis of the Trump administration so far?
It is the biggest crisis, yes.
Okay, so Mike Anderson says you Democrats can run this all day, but the only one who cares anymore is Democrats. Everyone else realizes we'll never get the real evidence. Thank you, Mike, for your participation.
I would say that the Trump administration is really out of step here and they don't know what to do.
Political reporter and author Will Sommer has watched the president try unsuccessfully to contain the Epstein saga. Will says it's a mess of Trump's own making after Republicans politicised the story.
I mean, Epstein was a huge issue. I mean, it was one of the major issues of the Trump campaign. I mean, they would go on these podcasts, on TV shows, and so people bring it up a lot. And they say, you know, are you going to be the one who finally figures out what happened to Epstein? How did he die? Who was he associated with? I think a lot of people really believe Trump would do it. So he's kind of hoisted on his own petard here. I mean, he revved up this base, and now when they're asking for what he promised them, he's refusing to deliver.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein is dead.
When Jeffrey Epstein's death in 2019 was ruled a suicide by a New York medical examiner, almost immediately, President Trump publicly latched on to conspiracy theories that it was part of a cover-up to protect his client list.
There's certainly about the way he died. It'd be interesting to find out what happened there, because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera.
Trump really is sort of the conspiracy theorist in chief in the United States. I mean, he is a guy who built his political career on conspiracy theories and just sort of lies more broadly. A lot of his appeal is based on the idea that he builds himself up as this guy who will protect you, not just from Democrats or people whose policies you don't like, but from these really nefarious, evil forces.
And then the question you have to ask is, did Bill Clinton go to the island? Because Epstein had an island. That was not a good place, as I understand it, and I was never there.
Audiobooks are no longer optional for authors. They are essential. Hi, I'm Sarah from
Okay, so the president says that he was never there. He never went to the island. I saw a good, here we go. Nathan Dunlap says, I have faith that Epstein files will be released next year before the midterm elections, which will be catastrophic to the Democratic Party. Okay, thank you, Nathan. Thank you.
Releasing the files and, in doing so, bringing down the so-called Washington elites was a Trump presidential campaign promise.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Repeated by the right wing.
Jeremy Taylor says Bill Clinton went to the Epstein Island 28 times. Bill Gates went over a dozen times. Okay. Wow.
Echo chamber.
Release the list. Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
So when the administration changed course last month,
I call it the Epstein hoax,
announcing there was no client list, no evidence of blackmail, and nothing to see, the reaction from the Make America Great Again movement was swift and furious.
I can't reconcile this Donald Trump with the Trump that we're seeing right now, the Trump that is gaslighting the public right now. The Epstein scandal is definitely terminal cancer to Trump's MAGA movement.
You're telling me there's no list after you told me there was a list?
Where's the Epstein files? Oh, can't find them. Don't exist. Like, they can get away with shit, man.
I have 3 of my MAGA hats here today, and we're going to burn them.
Have you been surprised by the extent of the backlash from Donald Trump's support base? A lot of people who voted for him have now turned against him.
I think that comes certainly when you make statements and promises and then you walk it back.
Theresa Helm voted for President Trump in last year's election because she believed he would expose Epstein's wider network.
I expected files to be released and people that deserve to be held accountable.
And she has more reason than most to feel betrayed by the president's lack of action. In 2002, while studying at a massage college in Los Angeles, then 22-year-old Theresa was lured into Jeffrey Epstein's dark orbit when she went for a job interview.
He was a very charismatic man. He was very friendly to start. I felt good about being there. I felt good about this opportunity. Then he said, let's go to my office. That's when everything changed and his demeanor changed.
It was there, Theresa says, Epstein requested a massage.
Literally within seconds, everything shifted from what I thought was a safe interview to this is very unsafe and this does not feel right and this is not right and I don't know what's happening and I don't know what to do. Not too much longer later, I found the door and ran out of there.
Theresa says she was sexually assaulted by Epstein, but it was years before she realised she was one of hundreds of young women ensnared in his depraved world.
It was definitely systematic. Everything was pre-planned, prearranged, organized. I was like a human baton that these women just passed along.
The Department of Justice has said there is no concrete evidence, there is no basis for investigating any third party. In your experience, how is that possible?
Okay, guys. Hank White says Trump betrayed the people who put him in office. I would have voted for Kamala had I known he would have sided with the rich and the powerful. Thank you for your comment, Hank. And thank you to everyone that's liked the video and sharing and so forth and subscribe.
It's impossible to do everything that they've done and harmed as many people as they have harmed without help. You know, they've had a lot of help. So who are they?
Do you think Trump's giving people the sense that he's not only protecting perhaps friends, predators, but also himself?
I think increasingly that is sort of the conclusion to draw. You have to start wondering, why is Trump acting so strangely about this? So you can see the administration attempts to sort of reduce the excitement around the files. And I think a lot of that is based on the fact that Trump is in them.
So is this the scandal that will finally stick to Teflon Trump?
This guy is just a fucking survivor.
Whatever you think of Donald Trump, there can be no denying the first 6 months of his second presidency has been productive. He's secured the border, addressed inflation and introduced a sprawling budget bill, overhauling tax cuts and healthcare. But for weeks now, no matter where he is in the world or what's on his agenda, there's a dark, uncomfortable controversy the president simply can't escape.
You know, Epstein was always a very controversial guy. I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island.
It is a crisis for him because it's a crisis of credibility. It's a crisis of integrity. Donald Trump needs to be talking about legislation. He needs to be talking about policy. So anytime he's on the defense, anytime he's talking about something that he said or did that isn't about getting something done for the American people, that's a negative.
Assalamu alaikum. Are you thinking about buying a franchise business? Don't.
Pollster and political analyst Frank Luntz has done more focus groups with Trump voters than just about anyone in the United States. So he knows why, even in the face of scandal, Trump's base is unshakable.
His own voters aren't voting for him because of his character. His own voters aren't voting for him because he's a stand-up guy. They're voting for him because he'll bring about the change they want and they need, and frankly, they deserve. Look at it this way. He was impeached twice. He was involved in January 6th, 4 different cases, 91 felony counts, and he was still elected president. Donald Trump is the ultimate survivor, and I expect nothing different about this current situation. This guy is just a fucking survivor.
But for those who were harmed by Jeffrey Epstein, there's no forgiving or forgetting. Maria Farmer was sexually assaulted by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in 1996. She reported the pair to the FBI that same year and named Donald Trump as one of their associates. But authorities did nothing, and now she's suing the US government for failing to protect her.
I want to hold the government accountable for systemic abuse of victims and children.
Maria's attorney, Jennifer Freeman, represents several of Epstein and Maxwell's victims.
This has been one of the largest law enforcement failures in US history.
Would we be sitting here today, Jennifer, having this conversation, if federal authorities had listened to Maria in 1996?
That's really the underlying sadness of this. That's the tragedy here, is no, we would not. Over 1,000 victims could have been spared. Some 30 years of abuse could have been avoided, prevented. It's tragic.
Like Maria and her lawyer, Teresa Helm is determined to see justice. Teresa was lured to Jeffrey Epstein's home by Ghislaine Maxwell in 2002 and sexually assaulted. She simply doesn't accept the assessment of US authorities that Maxwell, convicted 5 times and serving a 20-year jail term, is the only person culpable. Do you believe the names of some of the other people that helped facilitate these crimes are in those files?
I don't know exactly what these files are supposed to look like. I have no idea. But what I do know is there has to be evidence supporting their network. You don't carry out an enterprise of exploitation for decades and have no paper trail or no trail at all.
Jeffrey Epstein's secrets died with him, and Ghislaine Maxwell has repeatedly denied her crimes, refusing to reveal details of how the trafficking operation was run and who else was involved. But with pressure building on the president to take action, he sent federal authorities to interview Maxwell at a Florida courthouse late last month.
She was asked maybe about 100 different people. She answered questions about everybody, and she didn't hold anything back.
But isn't the incentive?
Already, Ghislaine Maxwell has been moved to a minimum security prison, and she's playing the president, refusing to testify before Congress unless she's granted protection. How do you feel when you see federal authorities sent to re-interview her, that she's moved to a minimum security prison?
It's disgusting. Ghislaine is a liar and a pedophile. Who gives credence to that?
Mr. President,
There can be no doubt Trump's sloppy handling of the Epstein files and the ensuing mess has wounded him. But according to Frank Luntz's recent polling, it's not enough to permanently scar the president.
Make no mistake, Jeffrey Epstein is probably the most hated person in America next to Adolf Hitler. But that said, it's not something top of mind. It is not something that people prioritize. Is this an irritant? Absolutely. Does this change the political equation for Donald Trump? Probably not.
For now, it's proving a tenacious thorn in the president's side. But like so many who've supported Donald Trump, Teresa is willing him to resolve this saga. Do you fear the president is not releasing these files in order to protect certain people?
I hope not.
Perhaps even himself.
I feel that I'm holding on to hope that we're going to get to the bottom of this. Because I'm not ready to accept that this is the end of the road and this is a case closed. I'm not ready to accept that.
On this week's 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes, to what extent are the Epstein files harming Donald Trump's presidency? In the last few weeks, it's just blown up for him. And I know there are some Republicans in Congress who are saying this could hurt him in the midterm elections. That's
Okay, guys, so we're covering the press conferences that Donald Trump is having with the leaders from the EU. And I'm going to try to find something. We're just buying time until they come back up again with an update. So let's see what else we could find here. I want to find something that's kind of unbiased, not too much biased material here. Let's see. Okay.
This is how I lowered my car insurance rate by $110.
I had no clue I was.
Want me to do? I mean, what's my task? You can be sure that the Russians will test this immediately in the first hour. They will test with drones and long-range strikes and check the resolve of what this so-called whether it's a security guarantee force or whatever. I think actually the best thing we could be doing to guarantee Ukraine's security is to help them defeat Russia. Number one, make Russia live within its own borders. And you do that by wrecking Russia's ability to export oil and gas to China, India, and Turkey. And then also investing in Ukraine's defense industry so that they can build everything that they need to defend themselves. I imagine that Ukraine, especially if they're not allowed into NATO, they will become a lot like Israel, and that the Ukrainian GUR will do what the Mossad does, and they will track down Russian senior officers,
General,
any of them that have.
Apologies, we're running out of program. General Ben Hodges, really great to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. Well, full coverage then of that summit in Washington.
Dude, 100, 100. 100, 100. Both of them are. I'm saying you got another 3 hours of it, right? More than that.
Thank you, Mark Polinsky. Thank you.
Hello there, good evening. It is 9 o'clock. You're watching Sky News' continuing coverage of Donald Trump hosting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, and other European leaders at the White House. Critical is this offer of security guarantees, the fact that America seems now to be backing that. We've seen the European leaders asking also for the idea of a truce or a ceasefire to come back on the table, something that seemed to diminish after that Alaska summit with President Putin last Friday. So Zelensky arrived in a suit. He even made a joke about it and very swiftly presented a letter to Donald Trump thanking his wife Melania for raising what had happened to thousands of Ukrainian children with President Putin last week. And in the past hour then, the leaders, along with Mark Rutte of NATO and Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union, gathered in the East Room of the White House to get down to the nitty-gritty of how it might be possible to bring about peace in Ukraine, with Donald Trump giving the introductory address in front of the cameras before inviting all the leaders to speak. Here's the highlights of what was said.
We're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelensky and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to.
Poughkeepsie Nissan's knocking it out of the park with Grand Slam savings. On first base, the new Nissan Murano SV all-wheel.
All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelensky and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult and very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result.
What is very important that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting. And he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will
both
participate.
want me there, I will be there. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back and all our people, not only warriors, first of all, warriors and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it. And I showed the president a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. Yeah. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you help a lot, and so we are happy that we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
That is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So
extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday, but now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
We do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation.
I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need the security guarantees.
We all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security.
Sir Keir Starmer, they're amongst those European leaders who have headed to Washington. Quite an extraordinary moment in terms of who is there, the choreography too of tonight. They've moved from there into the Oval Office. But let's head to the White House then and speak to our deputy political editor, Sam Coates. They had multiple messages, didn't they, Sam? What was your takeaway from all of that?
Look, I think on its own terms, the people sitting around that table that you just saw will actually think that today has been, broadly speaking, a success, a net positive. Now, I'll put that in a bit of context in a moment. We haven't solved the war in Ukraine. We're baby steps forwards towards peace, but at least things didn't go backwards. Let's remember what happened today and why it happened. In essence, 8 European leaders scrambled over the last 24 hours to get to Washington to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky, because they worried, after President Trump met President Putin on Friday, that Ukraine could be bounced into some kind of peace deal that it didn't want to accept. And they wanted to stop that. And stop that, broadly speaking, they did. We are in a situation now where none of that appears to have happened. The optics between President Zelensky, President Trump, much better than we saw in February. And there are lots of issues. There are lots of things that are unresolved. There is lots of detail left to be coloured in. But a couple of things, concrete things, did happen today. The most important of which is President Trump made clear, said on camera, personally committing to security guarantees, to back up a European effort when it comes to protecting Ukraine in the event of a future peace deal. Now, we don't know what that amounts to, we don't know what that looks like, but the fact he said it on camera is a net positive. Now, we are not clear whether there'll be US troops or whether the US could be called in as a matter of last regard, but that's the kind of thing that they were talking about around the table with the European leaders after the cameras were switched off.
Jeremy Taylor says Russia is in serious financial difficulties. Giving them peace now is a bad deal.
From President Zelensky's perspective, European leaders will be pleased that he didn't kick off about that.
Guys, hit the like button, share, and subscribe if you like the information.
Past difficult areas, unresolved areas, but again, it wasn't a problem that ended up being a blockage. So we are a long way away from any kind of settlement here. Yes, there's talk of a trilateral Putin, Zelensky, and Trump getting around the table. There is we don't know very much detail about the security guarantee. We certainly don't know how the issue of territory is going to be resolved. And there's an awful lot that needs to be fleshed out in order to make all of that work. But today wasn't a moment that went backwards. That was the fear just 24 hours ago.
Much indeed. Well, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is in Kyiv listening to these sprays, as they call them, in the Oval Office. First of all, with Zelensky himself, besooted, as we noticed, thanking Donald Trump instantly, and then later with those leaders who have shown such support to him, flanking him for this. How's it going down in Ukraine tonight?
Well, I think Ukrainians will be relieved, as European leaders will, of course, that this didn't blow up into a disaster in the Oval Office, and they'll be encouraged to some extent that diplomacy is sort of back on track and heading in some kind of direction. But I think they'll also say, as your guests have been saying over the last hour or so, Anna, that this diplomacy seems to have things the wrong way round. It's starting for the wrong premise. For them, the opening premise is that Vladimir Putin does not want just a bit of Ukraine. He doesn't believe that Ukraine should exist at all as an independent entity and needs to be absorbed into Russia, and he's not going to rest until that ambition is achieved. So they would say the only way he could be stopped is for him to be convinced that there's no point in continuing with his misadventure here, and for that to happen, it needs to be a show of force that stops him. So anything that encourages him to carry on, I think they believe is very much mistaken. Particularly all talk of handing over territory that his forces have tried to get their hands on for 11 years. years, such as the Donetsk, and get that for nothing. Having been to Bakhmut a couple of years ago, I can tell you how hard the Ukrainians have fought to keep every inch of that territory. They lost Bakhmut with 50, 60,000 soldiers dying on both sides, and they have fought the Ukrainians tooth and nail to keep the Donetsk. And if they give it up, it's politically suicidal for Zelensky and also strategically very difficult for the Ukrainians. So I think, they will be relieved that the talk of territory exchanges, if you can call it that, seems to be receding a bit. They might be encouraged about this potential sort of rather vague sense that America might be getting involved again on the ideas of security guarantees should any peace be struck. But I think they feel that the most important thing is a ceasefire is demanded again, and the threat of much more severe sanctions is felt again by Vladimir Putin, and they're alarmed that that has receded for now. So I think Zelensky's challenge, and the European leaders with him, is to try and to get Trump back onto their side of the argument, even when he speaks to Vladimir Putin, possibly in their presence in the Oval Office, and that they keep on keeping him on their side of the argument. And the problem with that is, of course, every time they think they've got him back, he seems to go back to swing his sympathies again behind Vladimir Putin. So very difficult diplomacy for them. I think Ukrainians will feel there's some progress being made today, relieved that there hasn't been a disaster in the Oval Office, but they have a huge number of lingering concerns about where this is all heading.
Dominic, live for us there in the Ukrainian capital. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go now to John Herbst, former US ambassador to Ukraine and senior director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Come on to the substantives in a minute. But, first of all, how did you feel seeing the European leaders, flanking Zelensky today, bodyguards, some suggested, wingmen? Was it necessary? Was it good for Donald Trump that he felt the center of the geopolitical universe, if you like? And was it needed to avoid a sellout, do you think?
Host this unprecedented event where how many major European leaders came to Washington on 2 days' notice to talk about a critical issue. I think this was a great demonstration of European support for Ukraine. And we've seen such support very clearly since at least February of this year, and it just continues to grow. I think they do collectively and individually. Lots of friends of Donald Trump in that group have an impact on the president. But as your previous speaker just said, Trump seems to head in one way after he talks to his European friends, and then maybe in a somewhat different way after he talks to Putin. So this is something that needs to be continually worked to keep President Trump moving in the right way. So I think it's been not a bad day so far. And of course, the fact that Trump is willing to talk about security guarantees, his participation in security guarantees, is absolutely critical. But there is one problem here, which I think is worth highlighting, but I'll let you ask your question first.
Say that a bit last bit again.
I think there's one problem which has not been discussed by anyone I've heard over the past 12, 20, 16 hours. That needs to be raised.
Which is what?
It's this. Trump is now talking, as of course are his European colleagues, about security guarantees. At the same time, Trump seems to be not unsympathetic to Putin's idea of Ukraine handing over Western Donbass, territory Russia does not occupy. That territory is strategically critical. It makes it much harder for Russia to go further into Ukraine. So if the U.S. and Europe are talking about providing security guarantees, they're putting themselves at much greater risk. This is something I don't think has been fully considered.
Very interesting. Yes, you've got the fortress cities that you're talking about there, and then the flatlands that the tanks loved so much in the Second World War. I mean, it leaves Ukraine so vulnerable, does it not? And that's always been a big concern.
President Trump, if he were to proceed this way, could be giving his successor a serious strategic dilemma. And I don't think he wants to do that.
So in terms of security guarantee, Trump was asked 2 questions today. Is this the end of the line for American help in Ukraine? And he said, I can't say that. And then he was asked specifically about the security guarantees. And he's talked about the European leaders being the first line of defense, but we will help them out. So everyone sits there going, how will you help them out? And what are you guaranteeing? There are so many stages still to go, but the mere fact that he's now talking about being involved in security guarantees, do you see that as a win for Ukraine?
Oh, it's a huge win. Look, 6 to 7 months ago, I argued that
Thank you, Bordo, for the super chat. Thanks for supporting the channel. Welcome, JDP. Phil Ponder says, there is no security guarantee.
They would want American intel. They would want American logistical support. I said, that's relatively easy.
For those of you just coming in, we're waiting for the president to come back on for the next press conference. We've covered 2 so far today, and he's having this next press conference with the leaders of the EU, namely Zelensky. We're trying to see if there's some sort of deal in the favor of Ukraine, or will it swing in the way of Russia?
Russia, he needs this land bridge, does he not, which takes in large parts of eastern Ukraine. So we're kind of back to square one in terms of land swaps. So where do you see the point at which this is solvable?
We're actually not back to square one. What we're seeing right now is consistent with Trump's approach since before he became president, as he was running for the presidency again, and during the pre-inaugural period. He talked about basically Ukrainian concessions on territory, but he didn't say Ukraine had to give territory which Russia had not taken. So, and Ukrainian concessions on territory need just be de facto. Same with Ukrainian concessions on Crimea. It would be a disaster for the United States as well as the global community if Trump were talking about de jure recognition of Russia's seizure and annexation.
Phil Ponder says President Trump will lose his MAGA base if he offers money or guarantees.
All of these things could be considered territorial swaps, although only de facto.
So we've had a still produced now of the 2 leaders, President.
Why doesn't everyone between 45 and 65 claim the 250,000?
No doubt, no doubt discussing what we just have is, land for peace, land for free. Some are suggesting, because you're swapping land illegally taken, effectively, are you not? But is this the nitty gritty now, do you think? Or is there any other way around this, apart from Ukraine sacrificing its land and its people, the people who are in there?
Look, there's no question that the greatest tragedy is would be the people living under the Russian boot, which is extraordinarily repressive against Ukrainian culture, against Ukrainians who worship outside of the Moscow Patriarchate, Russian Orthodox Church, and so on. Speak to
Nalinda Harriet says, thanks for everyone who has gone for the meeting today, because the entire world want peace and prosperity.
Meaning Ukraine getting all of its land back, Russia paying massive reparations, Russia returning those 20,000 kidnapped children. But Trump has been adamant about achieving a durable peace. And while that's not wonderful, it's not terrible either. And that could be an okay outcome. And if Trump pursues that with the strength of the United States, Putin will have no choice but to submit. But so far, we haven't seen President Trump really use our power, although he's hinted at it, and he may yet use it. And that will be necessary to persuade Putin to accept a Ukraine which he does not control, which is his objective.
And just very quickly, Ambassador, was part of the problem here, or the main part of the problem, that Joe Biden soft-rolled weaponry to Ukraine at a critical point?
Biden and his team were annoyed that I called his policy only adequate, because he provided enough stuff, serious amount of weapons and economic aid, but he was intimidated by Putin's nuclear threats and did exactly what you said. He slow-rolled weapons. If he had armed Ukraine to win the 2023 offensive, they would have won it. And by winning, it means they could have seriously damaged, if not broken, the Russian land bridge to Crimea and created a strong strategic problem for Putin.
John Herbst, great to talk to you, former US ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we saw the leaders from Europe meeting there alongside NATO and the European Union. But earlier, there was a meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office. The media invited in. One of the big topics was that of US security guarantees Ukraine needs in any peace deal, and whether President Trump would be willing to provide them.
And I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know.
All right, so we're going to take a little break from this. We're going to go back. Then the last video I showed was a little biased, so it was biased toward the blue, I would say. So let's go a little bit different here. Let's find something that's a little bit not too biased, but we'll give you something else. I saw something. Okay. Here we go.
They keep outperforming me and call me crazy, but I hope they never stop. Everyone thinks I have a team, a full-on 5-person operation, but it's just me and Motion. I didn't hire anyone. I hired AI, a team.
Welcome back. A Democrat whistleblower has emerged saying that the then Democrat chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, authorized leaks of classified information to damage President Trump during his first term. The whistleblower, a longtime Democrat staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, said Schiff was upset because he expected to be the CIA director in a Hillary Clinton presidency. In a statement to Fox News, a spokesperson for Schiff said this: Kash Patel's latest smear against Senator Schiff is absolutely and categorically false and is the latest in a series of defamatory attacks from the president and his allies meant to distract from their plummeting poll numbers and the Epstein files scandal. Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the director of the DOJ Weaponization Working Group, Ed Martin. He is investigating the weaponization of government, including Adam Schiff, New York Attorney General Letitia James for mortgage fraud, and the January 6th probe, among others. Ed Martin, great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Oh, always a pleasure, Maria.
And Ed, it has really, truly been a decade of dirty tricks, and that's being kind about it, against Donald Trump, beginning with the Russia hoax, to the impeachments, to the indictments, to the Hunter Biden laptop. Assess for us the last 10 years in your view, and you have criminal referrals right now on Adam Schiff, Letitia James, among others. What is the status?
Well, first of all, thanks for asking about the last 10 years. I mean, you know, when Donald Trump came into office as president, he signed an executive order saying, go and find out how government was weaponized against the citizens. When Attorney General Bondi came into office, she put a memo, put more specifics to it, and said, get to the bottom of this. She gave a specific list and a broad charge. And I have to tell you, for your viewers, we have the Attorney General Bondi has that Department of Justice spinning like a top. We've got more stuff going on. A lot of it we can't talk about because of the nature of it, but it's going like crazy. And one of them was, we were in a group, we're still in it, working on the Russia hoax. And Tulsi Gabbard declassified what happened, and she sent it over to us, to DOJ, as a criminal referral, and that's ongoing now. But what that was, and Maria, you're one of the earliest, I think you might be the only person, the only journalist who said early on, this is a Russia hoax. And you know, Brett had President Trump on an interview on that flight to Alaska, and in the interview, President Trump said, the Russia hoax was meant to destroy the relationship with Russia, make it impossible to get things under control, get a reset like Hillary said she wanted. So what we have in the Department of Justice now is a weaponization working group and the backing of our leadership to go and find this stuff. And so the Russia hoax, we know the birthday of the Russia hoax. It's December 8th, 2016, where the Obama administration, including Obama, said, don't put the truth out, lie, and ask the media to help us. And the Washington Post and others jumped right in. And then we had the Russia hoax that went on for 10 years. And every time they get in trouble, meaning the deep state and others, they throw another hoax out. And all we're doing at DOJ and all we're doing across the government is saying, get the truth out. And then, by the way, let's hold people accountable. And that's exactly what's going on. So when Bill Pulte sends a criminal referral over to us, and he says, Letitia James and Adam Schiff, and by the way, both their lawyers have come out and talked publicly about that criminal referral. So you can talk to them about the specifics, because I'm going to tell you what we're going to do is we're going to follow the facts. Every American has that has a mortgage or has other documents they sign has to follow the law. We're going to go to the very bottom of the facts. And if somebody did something wrong, we're not only going to hold them accountable, we're also going to look at everything else that they've been doing. Because when you're a liar, you lie not just on one thing. When you're a cheater, you cheat not just on one thing. When you're doing corruption, you generally don't just do it on one thing. So we have that's our what we're asked to do as prosecutors, and that's what we're doing.
Well, we are all waiting for accountability here. Adam Schiff went on Sunday morning programs and said there was collusion in plain sight. And he was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, so he had to know better that there was no evidence of any collusion in plain sight. So are you saying that this criminal referral is about something completely different, about mortgage fraud? Are you looking to get him on something other than Russia collusion?
Well, I'm saying that there's a referral from Bill Pulte about a mortgage fraud about Adam Schiff. That's publicly discussed. His own lawyers have been out there. Now there's more on Adam Schiff. And all we're going to do, again, is get to the facts of this and use all the tools that we have in our system. What we've discovered, and I know you want to ask me about some of this in the weaponization, is that Joe Biden's Justice Department actively targeted American citizens, Catholics who went to Mass, parents who went to school boards, people who were involved in the Russia. You know, I hear from Carter Page every now and then. Carter Page was destroyed by the Russia hoax. And we're sitting around and pretending it's okay to say that, you know, there was a secret meeting on December 9th, 2016 in the Situation Room where they plotted the Russia hoax. And then we're going to say, oh, that was really bad. No, it wasn't really bad. It needs to be held accountable in every way we can.
Well, you went to Letitia James's home this week. You were in New York.
Yeah, look, I'm a prosecutor, and when I do these cases, I was in New York I was in Newark, actually, New Jersey, for some meetings, and I went over to New York for another meeting, and I went by there. One of the referrals is about that property that she has, is a very prominent neighborhood in Brooklyn. And
it's safe to say that politics has been weaponized.
Something you're careful. I didn't go there and announce it. Some woman came storming up and shooting video and talking to me, but I wanted to see the property. And there's a number of other aspects of these cases where you got to get a sense of what is actually at stake.
Do you have a grand jury in these cases?
Do you have a car? Do you have a clean driving record? Did you know that you could pay as low as $39?
Let me say, when you get a criminal referral, one of the tools you have is a grand jury, and I'll leave it to you to infer what I mean. But these referrals are criminal referrals, significant enough that that they would warrant using all the tools, and the tools include subpoenas and witnesses, and that is in our system. That is the system. I'm not like Jack Smith. Jack Smith liked to talk about how he did things and what he did and brag about it. Letitia James did, by the way, as a prosecutor. She liked to come out and hold press conferences. I'll just tell you, when you get a criminal referral, and her own lawyer made the comments publicly, you can infer what you need to.
Well, let's talk about January 6th, because you are also investigating January 6th, which was also part of this 10 years of scandals. What have you learned?
Well, again, Attorney General Pam Bondi let us loose on this, and there's a group of us working on January 6th. What we've learned is that the federal government, the Department of Justice, but other aspects, targeted these citizens. They basically turned government on to make the hoax work. So I'm not talking about somebody that pushes a cop. That's a charge you can look at in charge. I'm talking about that the FBI and others were putting American citizens on terrorism watch lists. They were auditing their IRS tax returns. They were targeting the American people. They were taking massive amounts of resources and moving them from fighting, child trafficking and fighting real corruption and saying we have to move everybody to look at the Capitol siege. It was a political hoax that was driven by Garland, Lisa Monaco, and others. And what, again, Attorney General Bondi has said is get to the bottom of it. Some of it may not be illegal, but it's some of the worst. In federal prosecutor world, we think about the importance of that role. There's a guy named Robert Jackson, who is the prosecutor guy. And what you see is Lisa Monaco's Justice Department acting in ways we've never seen before. This is going, and when we show all that, and we're writing reports regularly on it, it's not one aspect. The federal court system was used in a way. The jails were used in a way to punish people. It's foreign. They didn't do this to the terrorists after 9/11, and they were doing it to American citizens. So that's a fulsome investigation.
All right. Fox says DJT, Donald J. Trump is a dirtbag. All right. All right. Thank you guys for all the participation. Please like, share, and subscribe. We try to stay biased, so we show a little bit of information from both sides. So feel free to express yourself, but do so respectfully.
Investigation on January 6th, and it will make clear the hoax, which is really the 2020 election hoax. We were told we couldn't talk about it because of January 6th, and the whole thing is falling apart, Maria, and it's going to get to the bottom, and the players are always the same. It's always the same people on December 9th.
Jesus Rivera says everyone wins when people stop dying. I can agree with that.
2016 in the Situation Room in Obama's White House are playing the same game all these years.
That's unbelievable. Real quick, what about the January 6th committee? Did they destroy evidence? Is there criminality there?
Of course, we're all in that too. And trust me, a lot of people did not get a pardon that were involved in the select committee, and they ought to be keeping an eye on their mailbox, because there's a lot to be asked about.
And the pardons that were given out were done by an auto pen. Are they legitimate?
Well, I'm the pardon attorney, so I'm in that too. I can tell you we're investigating how the pardons were granted. It was not like anything in the history of America what not Joe Biden, his staffers did, not just with the auto pen, but with faking him out on the memos. More to come, Maria. I'm telling you, Pam Bondi has let us loose, and when this comes out, it'll take the whole of these people's hoaxes down, and we're doing it bit by bit, and it's fantastic. It's a great privilege.
Unbelievable. Ed Martin, we're going to be...
All right. So we're still waiting for Donald Trump and the leaders of the EU to come back and give us an update on how the meetings went. But until then, we're just checking out different news sources and different clips. It looks like the Democrats are trying to redistrict down in Florida. So we're going to try to see if we can get some information on that, folks. Stay tuned. We're going to try to have at it, see what's happening. See what's happening, what's going on.
Bigger than one election. This is about fair maps, fair elections, and fair representation, which is the foundation of our state and our nation. So
these Florida Democrats speaking out against some of the Republican plans for redistricting. We have seen similar protest happening in multiple states, including California and, of course, Texas, really the jumping off point for these nationwide protests. All right, everyone, we'll take a 2-minute break. When we come back, we will take you out to the White House. I want to showcase some of the highlights of President Trump and President Zelensky meeting just days after President Trump met with President Putin.
There's a okay, so let's try. We're going to pull up something else here. Just sit tight here. And it's going to get something else a little bit to discuss. All right. All right. This is something I saw earlier. I can't wait to watch this to see what's happening. Let's get to it here.
One of the most difficult things is showing plans on a laptop or a small screen, because you have to zoom in so much.
The breaking news this morning: in just a few hours, President Trump will welcome Ukrainian President Zelensky and several top European leaders to the White House. The purpose: try to find a path to ending Russia's war in Ukraine. And it comes just days after, as we all watch, the president met with the other key party in all of this, Russian President Vladimir Putin. And that red carpet treatment was quite the contrast to the tense reception that Zelensky received at the White House the last time he was there back in February. For Zelensky, today's Oval Office visit is a chance for a do-over, a redo, a reset, if you will. But he may not like the terms that are being laid out before him as he's about to walk in. Overnight, President Trump wrote on social media that Zelensky could end the war almost immediately, which Putin started, by giving up Ukraine's claim to Crimea and its hopes of joining NATO. And this is the message from Russia overnight. Moscow launching a new series of attacks, a new series of strikes that hit a residential building, killing at least 7 people, including a toddler. President Zelensky posted that this kind of attack is exactly why Ukraine needs security guarantees as part of any deal in order to make sure Putin actually will stop and not relaunch a new war just after. CNN's Elena Treen standing by at the White House, where it really is about to get underway, all of this in this series of meetings that will be happening. What's the very latest you're hearing from there?
Well, look, this is going to be very crucial, Kate, to how this moves forward. And I think one key that is very much clear from the United States side is that the president wants to try to end this war as quickly and swiftly as possible. That's why we've seen him move at great speed to try and organize these types of meetings. However, what's unclear is whether or not Zelensky, but also the 7 European leaders who are going to be joining him today to meet with President Trump are willing to make the same type of concessions that President Donald Trump is. One of that is, of course, the message we saw the president lay out last night. He essentially said, in order to end the war, Ukraine must be willing to give up Crimea, a territory that Russia, I'd remind you, illegally annexed in 2014, and also agree not to become a member of NATO. Those are among the conditions we know that Vladimir Putin laid out on Friday that he believes are necessary in order to reach a peace deal. But there is also a bright spot for Ukraine. We did hear yesterday from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. He was on CNN saying that Russia is willing to accept security guarantees. And we have heard from our reporting, particularly on from some European leaders, that the U.S. is far more open to being the ones to provide those security guarantees than they had been in the past. One thing as well that I think, of course, is worth noting is that we are now hearing the president say that he is not going to be pushing for a ceasefire. This is very different than the rhetoric we had heard in the past, particularly, you know, the president, I remind you how we got here. The president had given Vladimir Putin a deadline of August 8th to either agree to a ceasefire or face severe economic pain and sanctions. That is now changing. Friday as well, we heard the president, when he was heading to Anchorage, Alaska, say that he would be very unhappy if they did not reach a ceasefire. But then just one day later, he said, actually, a mere ceasefire is not what we're looking for. We're going to go straight ahead and try to push for a broader peace deal. Of course, something that has potentially left some people in Europe and in Ukraine a little nervous, because that does give Russia, of course, more time to continue the fighting that we saw them really aggressively ramp up last night. All to say, this is going to be a very, very important meeting as to see whether or not the talks can progress in the way that the Trump administration wants them to. We know a key goal for them is to try and set up a second meeting, this time having it be a trilateral meeting between President Donald Trump, President Vladimir Putin, and President Zelensky. And so we'll see if that's actually something that is achievable today. But again, we're hearing, you know, we did hear from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, kind of lower expectations, saying they're not on the precipice of a deal. This is all about making progress. So we'll see what kind of progress actually can be made once these leaders arrive.
And joining us now for more on this is CNN Global Affairs commentator Sabrina Singh. And Sabrina, just on the fundamental first basic issue of a ceasefire now or it doesn't matter now, the dramatic swings in position that we saw in.
Okay, guys. Javid says if you become a millionaire while in office, you should be investigated. Bottom line.
Heard from President Trump going into his meeting with Putin saying a ceasefire was needed in order to get to a peace deal, leaving the meeting saying that's no longer necessary at all. If he now comes out of the meeting today doing, I don't know, a 180 or even something slightly short of that yet again.
What do you guys think about the meeting between Donald Trump and President Putin? Do you think it was probably more laid out than any other president or leader that we've ever seen come to America during his presidency? Do you think he was highly favored? What do you think? Tell us.
And I mean, what does that mean for Donald Trump in the United States being the peace broker here?
Before Married America, Amy was struggling financially as a single parent. She worked as a truck operator.
Well, you've continued to see the president flip-flop on his positions. I mean, he went into the summit on Friday with two objectives: to achieve a ceasefire, and if that didn't happen, there would be severe consequences put on Russia. And both of those objectives really fell apart.
They got into the same car, folks, the same car.
So I think today's meeting, if it's now, you know, we need a ceasefire back on the table, we're accustomed to seeing President Trump flip his positions. I think what's dangerous.
Now that picture looks kind of weird, I must say.
Here is the United States losing its credibility on the world stage to be able to really broker peace deals and to be taken seriously. At the end of the day, what makes the United States a great and powerful nation is our steadiness and our being able to lead nations all around the world. And so that's why the president's words really matter. And when you hear that flip-flopping of positions, it makes European leaders, the Ukrainians, and others around the world very skeptical about each time they have a conversation with the president.
And as we know from our Elena Trine was just talking about, the main goal today is to get to a place of having a trilateral meeting next. I mean, from just a communications perspective, if they leave this meeting and President Zelensky is not on board with, a trilateral meeting, and Putin's not on board with a trilateral meeting, I mean, what does Donald Trump do next? If the trilateral meeting is like is the prize that he's trying to achieve, short of actually ending the war, I mean, what are the chances you think they actually get there today?
I think it's going to be really hard and very difficult. I mean, a trilateral meeting, while I understand that is the White House's objective, and ultimately this war will end at the negotiating table in a diplomatic fashion, the reality is that both sides are so far apart on what peace looks like. And we don't have a ceasefire in place. And so you're continuing to see these Russian aerial attacks hitting cities overnight, right before the summit took place on Friday. And so if there's not a trilateral agreement or a meeting set, I don't think that were a complete failure. I think it's a good thing that this administration is engaging with the Russians, is engaging with the Ukrainians. But at the end of the day, putting posts out on Truth Social, basically blaming again Ukraine for the start of the war, it's just not helpful. And saying that Ukraine is ultimately the one that could end this war, that really flies in the face of the aggressor, the invading country, invading its sovereign neighbor and sovereign territory, who's just trying to fight for survival at this point. So while I hope there's a trilateral meeting at some point, I don't know that we will get there.
Yeah, and saying, Ukraine can end this war almost immediately, it is not something we really, it's hard to find President Trump ever saying that about Russia, which obviously is the aggressor and could easily end this war immediately. On, as you were saying, the messaging going out on social media, the president did just send out another short message on social media saying this: a big day at the White House. We've never had so many European leaders here at one time. A great honor for America. Let's see what the results will be. It kind of speaks to, there's also this element of the show and of the stagecraft that is going to be on display at the White House today around all of this.
I think that's exactly right. There's a lot of show, and you'll remember right before that Alaska summit on Friday, the president also tweeted or posted on Truth Social, high stakes. This is a high stakes game, but what makes diplomacy is very difficult, and it takes steady leadership. And so while there are high stakes with this meeting and the one, of course, that came out of Friday, at the end of the day, what we really want to see here is the president putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table for a ceasefire. That's what needs to happen. And so I hope the president hears President Zelensky, other European leaders, and their plea to the president that the pressure really needs to be put on Russia and not Ukraine.
Yeah, Sabrina, it's great to see you. Thank you so much.
One thing never changes. Life.
Okay, very good. So we're still waiting for the president and the EU leaders to come back. We're going to try to find any update available.
At stake today, nothing less than the very future of Ukraine and America's standing in the world. Because the meetings with European leaders happening at the White House right now as we come on the air stand to potentially reshape the global order for better, or depending on how things go, for worse. At the moment, there is a multilateral meeting underway in the East Room with a number of European leaders in attendance. They are essentially there as backup for Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, following that travesty of an embarrassment, the ambush on Donald Trump's part back in February of President Zelensky earlier this year. Earlier today, though, Donald Trump and President Zelensky appeared together in the Oval Office. Trump largely behaved himself. That counts as news. He did, though, either wittingly or unwittingly make some news. It had to do with the necessity for a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Listen to what Trump had to say on the topic throughout last week and how something seemingly changed on that topic this afternoon.
It could be a good meeting, and we'll go a step further. We'll get it done. I'd like to see a ceasefire very, very quickly. I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires.
You know that feeling when you're slammed all day, but nothing important actually got done? I thought I had a productivity.
It's not just one country that wants a ceasefire. It's Vladimir Putin's Russia. So all of a sudden, a ceasefire? I don't do ceasefires. We don't need those. Then about an hour ago, Donald Trump shared this news on a key piece of any negotiations: security guarantees for Ukraine.
The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure.
Of course, everybody at the White House today, vast majority of Americans, vast majority of Ukrainians want peace for Ukraine. The real rub, though, at least for the U.S., is how we get there. In one possible scenario, America stands proudly with her allies, working in coordination with like-minded democratic nations to apply pressure on Russia, the aggressor, the instigator of the war in Ukraine, lest anyone involved forget that. In another, the U.S. moves toward Russia and more fully embraces the aggressor and the instigator, advocating for Russia's desired position, Russia's desired concessions from Ukraine, against the wishes of some of our allies who came to our aid, not for nothing, in the aftermath of September 11th as our NATO allies, without question. It's worth noting that ahead of today's meetings, after Donald Trump met with Putin on Friday, Russia was seemingly militarily, at least, emboldened, launching a deadly assault on Ukrainian cities near the borders, including Kharkiv. Ukrainian officials say 10 people died in those attacks. This live and ongoing and still deadly for the Ukrainians, at least, geopolitical fork in the road is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, MSNBC International Affairs Analyst, Ambassador Michael McFaul is back with us. Also back with us, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling's here. And rounding out our group, former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill is here. Ambassador McFaul, I'll start with you. Just on what we've laid out, where are your thoughts, where are your hopes, and where are your fears?
Well, I think last Friday, that Alaska summit was one of the most disastrous summits that I can think of. Did no good in terms of advancing America's interests or the interests of our allies or Ukraine. And we treated this horrible dictator who terrorizes Ukrainians every single night, as you just showed, by killing them through these attacks on civilians. We treated him like he was some special friend of the United States. Today's been a correction to that. There was a good meeting so far, at least the optics. We don't know the substance yet. It's too early to tell. But President Zelensky came. That was smart, whoever's idea that was. And then adding the Europeans, that was a brilliant move. Whosever idea that was, if that was somebody on Trump's team, I don't know who it was, but it was brilliant because it set the context into something bigger than just about Trump versus Zelensky. And that just For Trump, that just reminds him of 2016 and impeachment. The conversation they just had with the cameras on just a few minutes ago put it in a much wider context. And secondly, began to correct the framing that Putin had trapped the president into on Friday. This notion that we can't have a ceasefire until we have a full agreement. Where in the diplomatic books does it say that? I've been a diplomat and I've studied diplomacy, all hundreds of years of American diplomacy. I studied for my last book. There's no rule book that says that. That was a Putin line, just as you were discussing. I'm glad, especially the chancellor from Germany said we can revisit that. And then secondly, talking seriously about security guarantees that might include European soldiers in Ukraine. That is progress. I would like it to be a NATO security guarantee rather than a NATO light security guarantee. But if you have to settle for something, that's much better than no security guarantee at all. I saw that was progress. The hard part, of course, comes when we get to the issues of territorial land swaps or where the lines will be. But this was a little bit of progress today.
Let me play Donald Trump on that topic of exchanging territory.
We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory taken into.
Guys, we want to welcome Deborah, and it's her birthday. Happy birthday to you, Deborah.
Consideration, the current line of contact, that means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad actually to look at them, and negotiating positions. President Putin.
What does that mean, Ambassador McFall? Can you translate that for us?
Yes, well, to the extent I understand President Trump. But when he's talking about exchanges of territory, let's just be crystal clear. He's talking about exchanging Ukrainian territory for Ukrainian territory. He's not talking about Russian territory. He's not talking about Russia leaving, maybe these little pieces up in Sumy, little pieces they might leave, but the big swaps are Ukraine for Ukraine. Moreover, to remind everybody, from Friday, Putin is demanding that Ukraine leave part of Donbass that Ukrainian soldiers currently control. That is his negotiating position right now. And the idea that we would help to mediate that is completely absurd. And so I hope that that will be one of the ridiculous maximalist points of Putin that might be retired after today's meeting, but it wasn't retired in Alaska. It was alive and well on Friday.
And I went in and looked at some maps and tried to remind myself of what the Donbass region is, why it's so bitterly fought over, how much of it Russia controls, how much of it Ukraine controls. Can you just talk me through what is Ukraine's position on any and all of Ukraine's territory?
Well, Ukraine's official position, President Zelensky's official position, of course, is to restore their territorial integrity to their 1991 borders, which includes Donbass, which includes Crimea. All that red you're showing, that should go back to Ukraine. That's their official position. When I talk informally with people in Ukraine, including those close to the president, I think they're ready to concede some control of their territory. They're not going to give it over, but they might agree to this formula, that we will only try to reunite our country through peaceful means as long as we get real security guarantees from the West, from NATO, from our European allies, and from the United States. And that's a formula that I think is the substantive piece that they should be talking about today. And in my view, the talk about land pieces, that should be between Putin and Zelensky, mediated by us, but that's not our conversation. But then the security guarantee part should be between Ukraine and NATO allies, including us, without Putin at the table. The idea that Putin gets to decide what the security guarantees are, I think that would be a big, big strategic mistake. Keep those conversations separate.
Okay, so we're still waiting for Donald Trump and the EU leaders to come back. So we're going to try to find any updates that are available.
Audiobooks are no longer optional for authors. They are essential. Hi, I'm Sarah from Spines, an online
Americans apply to join ICE. Apply to join ICE. Think about it. To help deport illegal aliens. Do you know what happened after 9/11? So many people joined what?
Police department.
The police department and military. You joined the police. You joined the
I was in during it, and then they did stop laws where we couldn't even leave, and people were joining left and right.
But there's a lot of people that would join because they're like, I'm going to go fight for my country, right?
Yep.
Now, Americans are saying, I want to go clean up the border. 100,000 Americans applied to join the ICE, 12 local arrests, and deport illegal aliens. As Department of Homeland Security officials reported, following a recruitment effort by Trump's administration, the campaign includes an ad campaign and a $50,000 signing bonus for new recruits. Damn.
Yeah.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem stated, our country is calling you to serve at ICE. In the wake of the Biden administration failing immigration policies, our country needs dedicated men and women of ICE to get the worst of the criminals out of the country. New ICE recruits are offered student loan repayment, forgiveness options, a 25% law enforcement availability pay for Homeland Security investigations, special agents, premium overtime payments for enforcement and removal operations, deportation officers, and enhanced retirement benefits, okay? So that's what they say. The bill also includes more than $46 billion for new border wall construction, $45 billion for ICE detention space, $10 billion reimbursed for states who covered border security costs under Joe Biden, and $3.5 billion for the Department of Justice to issue grants to local governments who help locate and arrest illegal aliens, among other funding measures. Okay. There was a clip of Mayor Basso losing it over.
Okay, looks like we have some updates, perhaps. Let's see what we have here.
5 tonight. Fox 8's Sharon Crowley monitoring the developments as they unfold at this hour. A lot to unpack, Sharon.
There certainly is, and it's still going on right now. It's an historic meeting at the White House as President Trump tries to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky meeting at the Oval Office just days after President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Zelensky and other European leaders are arriving at the White House today for meetings, and those meetings are still going on, and they're aimed at the war in Ukraine. And the stakes couldn't be higher. President Trump is trying to get Ukraine and Russia to agree to a comprehensive peace plan centered on security guarantees for Ukraine in exchange for the recognition of captured land as Russian territory.
I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now.
Burberry says, remind me, didn't Donald J. Trump state that he would end the war in 24 hours of him getting back in? Good point.
I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal.
Well, Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine, and Zelensky would have to give some of that land up for a peace deal. Zelensky points out Ukraine was given similar guarantees when it gave up territory in 1994, but Putin attacked anyway.
I think we showed that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war.
So the European leaders there today say that they see the U.S. offer to back security guarantees for Ukraine as a game changer if they can convince Zelensky to sign on to the deal. Now, the next summit could be with all three leaders together, and President Trump says such a meeting between Putin and Zelensky could happen within a few weeks. We may find out more in the next hour or so, Bianca.
All right, Sharon, thanks so much. Let's turn to some breaking news. This is out of New Jersey. The health department is investigating a case of malaria. A resident in Morris County has tested positive for the disease and had no international travel history. If confirmed, this could be the first locally acquired case of malaria in Jersey since 1991. Health officials say the risk to the general public is low, but to prevent mosquito bites, use an EPA-registered insect repellent and wear long-sleeve shirts and pants outdoors.
Now to this, the NYPD investigating a deadly mass shooting over the weekend that killed 3 people.
It happened in Crown Heights on Sunday, and at this hour, there are still no arrests.
Let's get right to Fox 5's Lisa Evers on the scene. Lisa, what are you hearing tonight?
Well, right now, police are telling us that 2 of the gang-affiliated trigger pullers are dead, and a third man who was inside this lounge was also killed. And now a manhunt is underway for at least 2 more gunmen who opened fire in this mass shooting, hitting a total of 14 people. All of this as the community is speaking out.
Part of the response is for us to show the community and the city and the world that's watching that whenever there's a mass shooting or whenever there's a shooting period, we respond expeditiously. And on this level of a mass shooting, this is what you get. You get every single hand that's on deck.
You have the VO. Go to the VO. The NYPD says the violence erupted inside the Taste of the City Lounge on Franklin Avenue about 3:30 Sunday morning. Sources close to the investigation tell me that adult members of the long-established Brooklyn gang called Folk Nation were inside. Suddenly, sources say their ops, members of an opposing gang, walked in and there was an argument. At least 4 shooters, likely more from the ops, pulled their guns and unloaded a barrage of 9mm and .38 caliber bullets, according to sources, striking 14 people ranging in age from 27 to 61. 3 are dead, with 2 of them being the gang-affiliated shooters who've been arrested multiple times before, according to police. And now all day long, crime scene detectives continue to collect evidence from inside the club. My sources tell me that from what it looks like, there may be at least 5 or more guns that were used in this mass shooting. Now, we've been told just a short time ago that Mayor Adams is expected to be here around 6 o'clock this evening to hold a vigil for the victims. That's the latest here from Crown Heights. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News.
5 or 7 guns with 37 rounds. That's a lot of shooting.
Involved shooting in Washington Heights. It happened around 9:45 last night. Police say an off-duty NYPD officer was standing outside a building near West 173rd Street and Amsterdam Avenue when 2 men on mopeds approached him. One of them asked if he knew a person's name and allegedly pulled out a gun. The officer then drew his own gun and fired several shots at the man, who was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The other man took off on the moped, and this was the second deadly shooting involving an off-duty officer in about 48 hours.
Meanwhile, the man convicted of murdering New Jersey council member Eunice Dumfour was sentenced to life in prison today. The judge handing down the maximum sentence to Rashid Bynum. A grand jury found him guilty of June of shooting and killing Sayreville council member as she sat in her parked car back in 2023. Prosecutors say they knew each other through church. Today, her family expressed thanks outside of court.
We got a justice. I'm so happy, and I know Eunice is happy.
June 4 was the first Black person elected to office in Sayreville.
A 36-year-old man is recovering after he was hit by lightning while golfing. Police in Morris County, New Jersey say the man went into cardiac arrest just after 6 last night at the Pinchbrook Golf Course. Several bystanders immediately started CPR and other life-saving efforts until paramedics arrived. Officials have not released any update on the man's condition.
All right, Nick, this is just more proof of why we need to be weather ready, especially in the summer when storms can just pop up at any given notice. Case in point, yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, exactly. And what is the line? When you hear thunder, seek cover, right?
Yes.
And don't take any chances. You know, lightning strikes, as you see, and as we know, can be quite deadly. Fortunately, our weather is much quieter today, and it will be quiet for a couple of days. We don't expect any thunderstorm activity, but we may have some showers returning by midweek. Today, well, you probably noticed how cool it was, right? Definitely cooler temperatures. In the lower 70s now from Bridgeport to White Plains.
So for those that are just coming in, we're waiting for Donald Trump and the leaders of the EU to come back. In the interim, we're looking at various videos.
75. Poughkeepsie, high 70s there at Sussex, but even 60s appearing on the map there. Belmar and down towards the Trenton area.
Let's see what we have here.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. You know, I have found over the years that sometimes it pays just to wait a few days before you digest and think through things, and then you can comment. These days, you got to comment right away. Well, I chose not to. So I've been thinking about President Trump and his meeting with Putin on Friday evening. And I thought to myself, there's no way Putin would have met with Biden. There's no way Putin would have met with anyone else but Donald Trump. And I think it's important that we set this up properly. Putin's in deep, deep trouble. He was forced out of Syria. Assad got creamed by the Israelis. He was forced out of his support for Iran because President Trump bombed those nuclear sites. So he's been relatively pushed out of the Middle East. What else is going on? NATO is bigger and stronger than ever before in its history, thanks to Donald Trump. 5% each country has to give of their GDP to build up their own military. And not only that, Ukraine is going to be heavily armed. Why? Well, because NATO is going to purchase the armaments from us. We have the greatest armaments on the face of the earth, and we can produce them faster than anybody else. And they're also going to get access to the kinds of armaments that they weren't allowed to have under Biden. Wow. What else? Russia's economy is all but dead. It's just waiting for the final dagger to go into their heart. And who holds the dagger? Donald Trump. Tariffing India and China if they continue to buy oil from Russia. That's all Russia has left. That's all Russia has left. A second tier of sanctions against Russia directly placed on them. What a disaster that would be. Putin's in trouble. His back is against the wall. He's a desperate man. They have over 1 million casualties in a 3.5-year period. Do you know more Russians have died in the battlefield? 250,000. More in 3.5 years than died in the entire Vietnam War? Than more Americans died in the entire Vietnam War? That is astonishing. So the question is, how much longer can Putin do this? Well, if he has his way, he'll keep doing it. You know who his hero is? Stalin. Do you know Putin is the second longest dictator in the history of Russia? Stalin being the first. And you know what else about him? He wrote a document, or somebody wrote it for him, that is Putin, in 2021. It was published. I've talked about it before. In fact, I talked about it last night. And what does he say in there? He lays it out. Things like 5,000 words long. And I looked at it again. Ukraine's just the beginning. Ukraine is in between him and Europe. He talks about Poland, because, you know, there are Russians in Poland. Talks about Romania, talks about Lithuania, the Balkan states. That's where this guy's head is. Now, this meeting that the president had with Putin There's a lot of hush-hush, as there should be. It's the first step in a negotiation, in a discussion. And maybe there'll be 10 more, and maybe there won't be. NATO has to have a role in this. I mean, after all, it is in Europe, and we say that all the time. This is Europe's war, right? And of course, Zelensky has to have a say in this, and I know there'll be enormous pressure on Zelensky to give up a third of his country, because that's what Putin will want. Just as there was enormous pressure on Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons in 1994, when Clinton and Britain and Russia promised, oh, give them up, don't worry, we'll protect you. We'll protect your boundaries, and you see what happened there. Nonetheless, here's the situation. Ronald Reagan destroyed the Soviet Union, really without firing a bullet. How did he do it? Economically. The Soviet Union was in terrible economic shape. Russia's in terrible economic shape. Reagan said, I'm going to massively build up our military, which he did. The Soviets couldn't keep up. Then he said, we're going to build the Strategic Defense Initiative. The left mocked him. They called it Star Wars. That was hundreds of billions of dollars a project. And of course, Gorbachev and the Soviets couldn't keep up. And so Reagan walked out of nuclear talks with them. They were going to basically, dump almost all the nuke weapons. And Reagan said, no, we're going to do the Strategic Defense Initiative, which, as we now know, are these defensive missile systems, and we want to build the Golden Dome and so forth and so on. Well, eventually they relented. They relented. Now, keep in mind, Gorbachev and Reagan were friends. Their wives were friends. Gorbachev was no Stalinist like Putin. None. But Reagan still wanted to take down the Soviet Union. He said, you see, Kissinger had it wrong. Dayton is wrong. And all these others, George Kennan early on, he had it wrong, mutual assured destruction. The Soviet Union can be destroyed. We build up our military. We confront them wherever they are, whether it's our hemisphere and so forth and so on. But most of all, we have economic power, peace through strength. And he destroyed the Soviet Union. Russia's in worse shape than the mothership, the Soviet Union, was. Worse shape. Right now, we have all the cards in our hands. Now, the problem is Putin is a monster, like his hero Stalin. So what? 1 million casualties. Who's going to stop him? They have 140 million population. He'll just keep going at it. Will he?
This is Danny and Chris. New home, empty rooms, on a budget. So they went to Ashley and found 7 empty.
Will he? We are much stronger. We have many more cards than he will ever have. Many more nations, many more resources, better weapons. Little Ukraine has suffered less casualties than big Russia. Russia has 140 million population. Ukraine has about 40 million. And look what those people in Ukraine have done to the Russians. Those people fight for their lives because they've lived historically, their ancestors, under Russian rule. Rape, murder, torture. Why do you think they fight now? Why do you think they fight the way they fight now? They see what Putin and his army has done when they take over these little villages in these areas. They're torturing Ukrainians. They're murdering them. They're raping them. They've taken 20,000 Ukrainian children out of Ukraine and brought them into Russia. That's what Stalin did. That's what he did. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight to the bitter end. So the question is, we don't like to see all this death. We don't like to see all this fighting. So this was the first meeting. And so the question is, how might this end? What's the most just way for this to end? What's the most logical way for this to end? It's for Putin to fail. He's a dictator. He won't be there forever. It's for him to fail. The Ukrainians didn't invade Russia. I know people don't like Zelensky. They attack him for reasons. I don't know why. It doesn't really matter to me. But the fact of the matter is he's led his country pretty well under the circumstances. And look what Putin's done to his country. You're supposed to walk through Ukraine like a hot knife through butter in 3 days. It's now 3.5 years. How did that go? So the issue is here, how do we bring peace without giving victory to Putin? How do you do that? I don't know. But I know Donald Trump is smart as hell, and he'll figure out some of this, or he'll walk away and bring down Russia economically, the way Reagan brought down the Soviet Union. You know, I think the best way to measure Trump in this is to look at what happened to Iran. He was very hopeful with Iran. And they negotiated, and then enough was enough. Enough was enough. We're talking about nuclear warheads in the hands of crazy people, Islamists. Well, here we're talking about a crazy guy too. He may not be an Islamist, but he's a Stalinist. He's a Stalinist. So this is the first round. I'm not telling you anything that Donald Trump doesn't already know. He knows all this too. Now, Putin said twice, I noticed, today's agreement, quote unquote, but there wasn't an agreement. There wasn't an agreement. The president said there's been great progress. He said to Sean Hannity, 1 to 10, he would rate it a 10. What did he rate a 10? The fact that they met and got along. That's what he rated at 10. But he also said there's a couple of really big issues out there, and I have to assume they deal with territory and the security of Ukraine's borders. That seems logical. If you're Ukraine, you're worried about somebody stealing 20, 30% of your country and security, particularly after 1994 when you signed an agreement and they were supposed to respect your security. But we have all the power, the tariffs on India and China, the secondary sanctions, the selling of weapons to NATO. NATO's bigger and more powerful than ever before. What does Russia have? Well, they have nukes. Okay, everybody has nukes. We have nukes. Britain has nukes. France has nukes. Germany has nukes. Nukes are not an issue in my view. Now, I don't know how this ends. Nobody knows how this ends. But I do know this. I don't think Putin is going to give up easily. And I think it may come to a point at some time when Donald Trump has to pull the trigger on the economic issues the way Reagan had to. Again, Reagan got along with Gorbachev, but, you know, peace is peace and war is war. And Putin's no Gorbachev. No, he's more Stalin. And his back is against the wall, whether he knows it or not, and I think he does. So it may in the end come down to that. We will see.
Hey, Sean Han.
All right. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to close the live. We're hitting the 3-hour mark. I'll be back up whenever we get a sign that the president, along with the leaders of the EU, has come back up for the press conference. And thank you for all the comments. Thanks for all the likes, shares. We've been streaming a long time today. We covered a lot of material, watched a lot of videos, but we're going to take a break, and I'll alert you. Put your notifications on so you'll see that when I'm live again, we'll stream the press conference. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you a little bit later.
Different voices, but the same song. Loving a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Of harmony, painting the night. United we